Welcome to the team. I just said it as we went to break. Their article up on Outkick right now. Dr. David Chao at ProFootballDoc on Twitter. We're excited to have you writing, running podcasts, continuing to be on the show. A lot of good stuff coming. I'm just super excited. I know you are ready to get rolling as well.
Yeah, thanks. I'm honored. Come a long way from just talking to each other on Twitter to this. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, and look, for people out there who are new to the show or have not seen Dr. Chao's work, because our show is exploding in a really good way. We're going to set another record in July for listenership, and I find people that I think are interesting all the time on Twitter, and I'm particularly drawn to people who have unique talents and an ability to express them in a really succinct and intelligent manner. And that's what I found with you, Dr. Chao, since we started working together on the radio. But I initially found you on Twitter. I was like, my God, this guy is incredible when it comes to diagnosing in real time what's going on during football games. And I just think we're going to help to expand your audience. And if you are a football fan, you need to be following at ProFootballDoc to get the latest information, because injuries are such an integral part of the way that football is played.
Yeah, well, that's what I try and do, decipher the why, not only the injury, but, decipher what really questionable means. Is it questionable and they're fine, there's no issue, or questionable and it's hide the bacon and this player isn't going to play?
All right, let's go into. So you've got a couple of articles that are going to go up today, but I want to start with Cam. There's been a lot of questions. People say, okay, well, the situation is very well set up here for the Patriots given the cost, but people are a little bit apprehensive about Cam Newton's health given that Liz Frank injury in his foot. How would you assess it? What do you expect to see from Cam now that we're not very far from training camp starting back up?
Yeah, I think this was the perfect storm for the Patriots to sign him. First of all, the lack of getting in-person physicals made the competition for signing Cam very weak, and so we ended up with the Patriots on a low-budget deal. And the irony is that's where he first hurt his foot in the preseason against the Patriots. But in any case, all Liz Frank injuries are not the same. There are different versions, different varieties. Yes, there are some Liz Frank injuries that I've panned and said, I'm pessimistic on someone's return. But here I'm optimistic. There's no way this was a high-grade, severe Liz Frank fracture dislocation type injury. Otherwise, he would have had surgery immediately in the preseason. He tried to play on it in the regular season. Then he rested for several months. He didn't have the surgery until December. I mean, it would be absolute malpractice to have him waiting 4 months to have surgery if it were a severe Liz Frank. So this is why I think he's going to be fine with his foot. His shoulder is also an issue potentially because it's his throwing shoulder. 2 procedures in the last 2 years, but even that, I think he's fine in the short term. In his own YouTube channel, postoperatively, the doctor talked about some wear on the articular cartilage indicating some arthritis, but for 2020, 2021, it shouldn't be an issue.
All right, let's go into the larger universe. You got a great piece that's going to be up. I'm not sure if it's officially up yet because I haven't clicked through to Outkick, but you're going to have it up. I'd encourage all of you to go to Outkick.com and check it out, talking about the way that the virus is going to have to managed by the NFL. And in particular, you said you're not as nervous or apprehensive about the virus spreading during the course of games as you are during the course of preparation for games around the locker room, meeting rooms, things like that. Explain why that would be for people out there who are listening to us.
Well, the first thing I would love to do is when people read this article or listen to these comments, stop with preconceptions and taking sides on whether this is, quote, a hoax or whether this is like the worst thing in the world. The truth is it's somewhere in the middle, and the medical facts, what I say is I can talk someone off the cliff who hasn't left their home in 3 months, and I could scare the bejesus out of somebody who thinks that this is a hoax. It's real, but here's the big misperception. I've made the statement that you're more likely to get coronavirus in the 6 days of the week in the team facility practices and meetings than you are on Sunday in a game. And people have the misperception of that if you tackle someone that you could get coronavirus. I suppose it's possible, but it's been shown, at least what we know so far, it's not one virus that infects you. It's not the movie Contagion. It's not the instantaneous contact. It's contact over time continuously with multiple hundreds, maybe thousands of viruses before you contract coronavirus. And the way you tackle and play, you're not typically in contact with the opposition for 15 minutes over the 3 hours. And that's what the CDC says you need for contact tracing. But in the locker room, in meeting rooms, in the training room, at the facility, you potentially are. So that's why the focus on, tackling it, et cetera, isn't the real focus in terms of how coronavirus is spread. And the NFL doesn't help the situation by banning post-game jersey swaps.
Yeah.
Right? Because that kind of looks silly. To me, if I were in charge, you allow the post-game jersey swaps, but you make everyone wear a mask as soon as the game is over. There's your optics. There's your thing that to promote some safety, as opposed to banning the jersey exchanges. And by the way, and look, I'm not saying you can't get coronavirus by playing in the NFL. Certainly, it is possible. We say in the article that if you have zero tolerance for contracting the disease, you shouldn't play NFL football, and there shouldn't be a season if there's zero tolerance for it. But the reality is, in the facility where there's going to be significant testing, is actually less likely or less dangerous than out in society where there's a fair amount of coronavirus in different places right now.
We're talking to Dr. David Chao at ProFootballDoc, now writing. You can see him every day at Outkick.com, and his article about the spread of the virus by playing football is up right now. I would encourage all of you to go read that as we are finishing up the show here. Go check it out. You can read his explanation in full detail. And I think that's important because you talk a couple of analogies that I think make sense. That if you're walking down the aisle at a grocery store and you later find out that somebody's at the grocery is tested positive, you aren't considered to be high risk. It's not like you need to quarantine yourself. And the other analogy you make is talking about the viral load and how being in close proximity and getting a lot of potential exposure to the virus matters. The difference between being, let's say, someone who is susceptible to sunburn but doesn't put on their sunscreen until they've already walked down to the beach. The minute that you expose yourself to the sun, unless you are just the fairest skinned person on the planet, you don't get sunburned. It's prolonged exposure, and that's typically the case with the virus as well.
Yeah, that's how I'm trying to describe the concept of viral load. But of course, I'm not comparing being sunburned to getting coronavirus.
Yeah, but the point of it is people can understand that it's not short. Like if you walk outside of your house to go to get to your car, you're not going to get sunburned. That's like passing somebody in the let's say the grocery store or whatever. But if let's say it's your significant other and you guys are in close proximity to each other, you're much more exposed to the virus that way and more likely to get it.
Yes, continuous exposure within 6 feet, multiple viral load, more than one virus, many more needed to cause COVID and catch coronavirus, just like not one ray of the sun, multiple rays of the sun. And there's no question that, if you're out in the sun at high noon, that you're more likely to be sunburned than if you're at 8 a.m. or 5 p.m. Just like if you're next to someone who's coughing, sneezing, and infected with coronavirus, you're going to get it much more likely than if someone who's asymptomatic. Look, locally here in Del Mar, I think 14 jockeys tested positive, and they shut down Del Mar racetrack because I don't think in their previous track, not at Del Mar, that there was enough social distancing in the locker room at Los Alamitos for the jockeys. So it was the locker room that caused it there.
Yeah, and that's just another significant part about this. It's not necessarily playing the sport itself. And you could make this analogy as you have before. Nobody who played against Rudy Gobert tested positive, even though in the NBA they're leaning against each other, sweating, all those things. it's more likely to be the prolonged exposure, certainly in football, getting ready, right? So you're in a meeting rooms, you're with your position group, all those things. That's where the NFL probably should, and college football as well, be focusing the majority of their attention, right?
Well, on game day, the risk isn't when the linebacker tackles the running back instantaneously. The bigger risk is, the bus ride over, the hotel the night before, the locker room situation, the training room situation, the warm-up situation, the sideline situation. Quite honestly, potentially the offensive huddle is a point of danger because, across the 3-hour game, you probably are in somewhat close proximity for 15 minutes, and we may see some changes there as well. And so those are the points of continuous contact that make it dangerous, not the instantaneous ones that people seem to focus on.
What do you think is going to, you've said it before, and I think it's an important message because it sets expectations. It will get a lot of attention when eventually NFL players come back and they start testing because they will find, you've said, every team will have some people who test positive. Why is that significant, and why is that not necessarily also a bad thing, even though the media may cover it as such?
I mean, players and coaches are human, so it's a reflection of society, and those numbers so far, depending on where you are about 5%. So if you gather 3,000 players and coaches and test them all, I'd be shocked if you didn't have triple digits, at least 100 players/coaches reporting testing positive. And the statistics will say it's, about 150, which is about 5 per team. That's not shocking. Unfortunately, it's a reflection of where we're at. But the hope is that they're mostly asymptomatic, and the hope is that with appropriate quarantining, that they don't infect people when they gather at the facility. That's the key issue. The issue isn't how many people test positive when you report. It's how you deal with that, how quickly you react, how you separate people, and to prevent further spread.
We had the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference, Greg Sankey, on the show yesterday, and he said across the entirety of the SEC, among their athletes, their number of people that are testing positive was rapidly approaching 0. They've been back on campus for a month. Is that pretty impressive to you? It sounded pretty impressive to me that initially they had a lot of people test positive, but the sign, like we saw with the MLS and like we've seen with other sports leagues, certainly in Europe with soccer, is they've done a pretty good job once they kind of get a handle on who's got it to limit the spread inside of those leagues.
Yeah, I have to take my hat off to the SEC if they're able to continue to keep it down very low, because it's not so much when you're working out and in controlled environments. You can control the locker room and make sure people are away and how you practice and where you stand and what you do. But, when you're dealing with 20-year-old kids, be it back at the dorms or the cafeteria or on weekends or evenings, look, I got to be honest. I mean, when I was in college, if coronavirus were out there, I'm not sure if I would have been, mature enough to always social distance and keep away from other friends and so forth. And so if the SEC can do that, that's my hat is off to them, and it's showing a lot of discipline from the players as well as a good job from the schools.
One of the things that's frustrating to me, and I'm sure frustrates a lot of the listeners, is the idea that science can become political. You are a doctor. When you look at the data, do you believe that your kids should be back in school, and or would you be comfortable sending your kids back to school?
Yeah, I personally would be comfortable sending the kids back to school, not only for the kids, but just for my wife's sanity. And
join the club, by the way.
Going on. But, it's interesting. And here's the thing about politics. And, I'm not trying to play politics or point anything out. I hate it when I get okey-doked. And this week, major media, the New York Times okey-doked me. The headline came out, LA and San Diego schools will not reopen this fall. And I was at work. I didn't have the time to read it. I forwarded it to my wife saying, oh, shoot, bad news. And then an hour later, the parents got an email from the San Diego Unified School District superintendent. and I'm paraphrasing now, but the email said the district has decided to start the first week of the fall semester with only online distance learning and then go from there. And that's not the same message. Now, meanwhile, Poway School District out here says they're going to continue to go to school. Rancho Santa Fe says they're going to continue to go to school. So there's a tremendous amount of mixed messaging. So maybe that's kind of what my goal is, to try and get the facts out there related to what's going on through Outkick and other venues.
Amen.